We are streaming. The only person I don't see who was there earlier was Commissioner Rush. But otherwise, Chair Hart, once we get to 12:30, it's up to you.
Okay, thanks. So this will be the 2-minute warning then.
So Commissioner Rush isn't going to be joining us today.
Is not.
That's correct.
Do we have a quorum without Commissioner Rush?
Yes, Chair, we do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's 12:30. Is everybody ready? All right. In that case, I hereby call this remote meeting of the Washington Metrorail Safety Commission to order. This meeting is being recorded as well as streamed live for the public. Mr. Smith, do we have a quorum today?
Yes, Chair Hart, we have a quorum in addition to yourself. Vice Chair Hall is here, Secretary Treasurer for our Dyke is here. Commissioner Al-Khatib is here, and alternate Commissioner Lobby is promoted to Commissioner today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. We will start today with our safety message from the Metrorail Safety Commission's Emergency Management Specialist, Richard David. Mr. David?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Remember to halt and think about your safety before you go out or get to work. H is for hungry. If you're hungry to the point of having low sugar levels or feeling lethargic, get the proper nutrition to function safely. A is for angry. If you're angry to the point where you cannot concentrate on your task at hand, take a breather, regroup, and focus your attention on the job you are doing. L is for lonely. If you're lonely or lacking to the point of feeling depressed, ask for help, take a mental break, and seek professional assistance. T is for tired. If you're tired and cannot focus, remain alert or otherwise perform your duties, tell someone to take over and get the appropriate rest. Please stay informed, stay healthy, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. David. We will now move on to the minutes from our last meeting. Secretary Treasurer Farrar Dyke, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. The minutes of March 8th were posted for your review. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, I move approval of the March 8th minutes as circulated. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Lobby has seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay.
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 All opposed, please
Yay.
raise your hand and say nay. Council Smith?
Sorry, I was muted. The vote is 5-0 and the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Farrar Dyke, and thank you, Mr. Smith. Next on our agenda is an opportunity for public comments, which we provide at each of our meetings. We will now ask if any members of the public who have joined our Zoom webinar would like to speak. If you do, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom and our staff will unmute one person at a time. Each person will have a maximum of 2 minutes. I will pause now to see if we have any public comments. While we're waiting, I'd also remind everyone, including those of you watching on YouTube, that you can always report any concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or by email. Ms. Biner, do we have anyone who has indicated that they would like to speak today?
No, I see no hands raised.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Miner. We will now continue with the next agenda item, which is my remarks. Our meeting today includes updates on the WMSC's ongoing safety oversight activities, including the status of Metrorail's response to our order related to the 7000 series rail cars. The WMSC is continuing our active involvement in the National Transportation Safety Board investigation into the October 12 derailment. WMSC has also been communicating with Metrorail regarding Metro's plans required under our order to safely return the 7000 series rail cars to revenue service. We are continuing our daily interactions with Metrorail on the 7000 series rail cars as part of carrying out our safety oversight responsibilities in the most timely and appropriate manner to assure safety. The WMSC appreciates Metrorail's acknowledgement that open communication at all levels of both organizations has been productive related to the 7000 series rail cars, and the acknowledgement of the importance of WMATA sharing drafts, information, and ideas openly and constructively with the WMSC as they become available to ensure effective cooperation and collaboration. WMSC will provide further updates as part of this meeting. The WMSC has been continuing our other proactive work to identify and require Metrorail to address safety issues, including through our robust safety audit and corrective action plan oversight process. That concludes my remarks. And Dr. Meyer, do you have any opening remarks?
Yes, sir, I do. Our staff is communicating with Metrorail on an ongoing basis about the 7000 series rail cars in regard to our December 29th order, keeping the 7000 series rail cars out of service until Metrorail develops an acceptable return to service plan. As of today, Metrorail has not provided a return to service plan for our review or acceptance. As we did in the fall, during Metrorail's development of its return to service plan completed in December that Metrorail then did not follow, we continue to review and discuss any items that Metrorail presents on an ongoing basis. This allows Metrorail every opportunity to continually improve its plans. Last month, Metrorail acknowledged that open communication at all levels in both our organizations has been productive related to the 7000 series railcars, and they acknowledged the importance of Metrorail sharing drafts, information, and ideas openly and constructively with us as they become available. We sent a letter back to Metrorail last month reminding them of the facts and our ongoing quick, responsive, and coordinated work. Since then, for example, Metrorail provided a draft procedure on March 29th related to planned back-to-back inspections to be conducted in shop facilities using a digital measurement gauge. We thoroughly and quickly reviewed this procedure and provided feedback and comments on April 1st. Metrorail provided responses to some of our questions last week that our team asked further follow-up questions on, and we're continuing these discussions. We're also engaging frequently with all of the parties about the investigation into the October 12th derailment as part of our active work on the NTSB investigation. The WMSC team is actively participating in test planning and data review, and our experts will be participating in a round of static testing starting next week. Once again, I've asked other members of the WMSC team to provide a more detailed update for you today on the 7000 series railcars as part of the next agenda item. At the same time, staff are continuing our oversight work in other areas, including safety audits, inspections, investigations, and safety certification oversight. We recently moved into the final stages of our work overseeing the safety certification process for Silver Line Phase 2. In addition to continuing the frequent meetings we are involved in with Metrorail and the Airports Authority, this phase of our work includes additional site visits and document review. We continue to communicate any concerns as they're identified, and due to this open and iterative communication over the last 3 years, Metrorail and MWA are working on or have completed safety mitigations to address each issue that is currently known. The WMSC's actions in the final stages of our work are dependent on WMATA following its written safety certification processes. Metrorail plans to complete some of these required safety steps closer to the start of revenue operations, Only after Metrorail and the Airports Authority complete all of these steps, such as safety mitigations, testing, repairs, staffing, and training, can the WMSC concur that WMATA has followed the safety certification process specified by Metrorail's policies and procedures. For both the 7000 series return to service planning required under our October and December orders and the Silver Line Phase 2 project, the WMSC has consistently provided productive and rapid feedback in open discussions, and of course will continue to do so. The timing of the WMSC's work on both the 7000 series rail cars and Silver Line Phase 2 project is wholly dependent on Metrorail's information sharing and Metrorail's progress on completing its work. And on both these important activities, we are ready to advance our work as Metrorail advances our own. Inspections are another important part of our proactive safety oversight work. For example, a WMSC inspection on March 28th identified safety concerns for Metrorail personnel and riders due to the condition of the train control room at Friendship Heights Station. Train control rooms house the vital equipment that, for example, indicates whether a section of track is occupied or not. The inspection identified that the room was covered in dust and other debris. The ceiling was also significantly deteriorated, and there were signs of previous water intrusion. Dust is a well-known hazard for train control equipment. The dust and debris posed a risk that the train control equipment could malfunction. The dust and debris in the room also posed a risk to Metrorail personnel. The WMSC required Metrorail to address these issues by protecting the train control equipment, assessing air and environmental quality in the room, cleaning the room, testing the equipment, and addressing water intrusion and ceiling deterioration. Metrorail responded to the WMSC within our required time frame as specified in the program standard and began implementing these improvements and protections. We continue to interact with Metrorail as they follow up to complete this work. The WMSC is reviewing and documenting the progress to determine whether any additional action could be necessary. Our work also includes following up on items identified in investigations. The hard work of our investigations team and Metrorail's investigations group to rule out various sources of debris that caused an electrical arcing event in November, which was the subject of investigation W150, also helped a more recent investigation quickly identify the source of debris on the tracks that was related to chiller pipe insulation and jackets. These pipes carry water used to maintain the temperature in Metrorail stations. The investigation is leading to permanent repairs to secure the metal jacket that protects the insulation. These had previously been secured with temporary fixes that were deteriorating and did not hold. Metrorail is progressing larger scale work to fully replace the entire run of chilled water insulation and metal jackets at Roslyn, Union Station, Van Ness, Woodley Park, Farragut North, and Tenleytown stations. Concerning our safety audits, since your last meeting, we issued our final rail operations audit report last Thursday. Audit interviews, site visits, and document reviews demonstrated that a culture that accepts non-compliance with written operational rules, instructions, and manuals exists at WMATA. Other findings included that Metrorail does not address operational hazards as required by its Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, and that Metrorail has inadequate internal communication, coordination processes to effectively manage change as required by its PTASP, the WMSC, and the FTA. The audit also identified specific safety gaps related to Metrorail training and certification requirements, including that Metrorail does not require and conduct effective territory familiarization and physical characteristics training and assessment. The audit report includes specific details and documentation and the 14 findings and 3 recommendations that Metrorail must address. We look forward to Metrorail's development of corrective action proposals over the next 30 days that will address the findings of the rail operations audit and improve safety on Metrorail. Our audit activity is a critical part of our proactive work to identify safety issues before a safety event occurs. Last month, we conducted our on-site work for our communications audit, and our team is completing follow-up document review and coordination now. An exit conference is scheduled in 2 weeks to provide Metrorail with preliminary findings. When the communications audit report is finalized, it will complete our first triennial safety audit of Metrorail. Over the course of each 3-year period, we audit, and we're required to audit, all aspects of Metrorail's safety plan. This proactive work identifies findings and recommendations that Metrorail is required to address to make the system safer for riders, workers, and first responders. Mr. Raddick will describe our current audit work in more detail later in this meeting. And that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. I just have one question, and that relates to Silver Line Phase 2. I remember some time ago, we talked about concern that they might not have the adequate personnel in the Operations Control Center to handle the extension, and I'm wondering how are we doing on that in that regard? In
the next agenda item, Ms. Samara Singha will talk in more detail about the Silver Line Phase 2 safety certification process, but it really is a success story that we identified in our ROC audit, a significant understaffing problem in the communications center that existed when we began that work. Gosh, that was just before the pandemic, so that must have been about 2.5 years ago. As a direct result of that work and Metro's hard work, they have significantly staffed up in the control center and have certified and trained quite a number of additional controllers.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Meyer. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Dr. Meyer? Seeing none, we will move on to a status update on the orders and related 7,000 on the orders related to the 7,000 series rail cars. So Ms. Samar Singh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Hart. As required by WMSC order, all 7,000 series trains are being kept out of passenger service until Metrorail develops and implements a return to service plan as specified in our orders. At this time, Metrorail has not submitted any items that are pending WMSC's acceptance. As always, we continue our frequent interactions with Metrorail personnel at all levels of the organization to ensure that our oversight is as informed as possible. This includes daily meetings, regular oversight of Metrorail's railcar programs, and participation in the NTSB investigation into the October 12th derailment. After Metrorail transmitted a letter to us last month, we sent the letter back to Metrorail reminding them of the facts and of our ongoing, quick, responsive, and coordinated work. The NTSB is in charge of the accident investigation, and we are continuing to work with them as a party to the investigation. The investigation has not determined the cause of the wheel movement on the 7,000 series axles. Work is ongoing to gather and analyze additional information as part of the investigation. This work includes both static and dynamic testing. Specific static testing is scheduled to start next week, with other tests expected to follow. Related to the Metrorail's potential 7,000 series return to service plan, our experts remain closely engaged with and monitoring Metrorail's work on automated wayside inspection systems that Metrorail may use in the future, and with Metrorail's work on improved manual wheel gauge measurement tools. Among our recent activities, as Dr. Meyer noted, we have reviewed and provided feedback on Metrorail's proposed improved manual measurement procedures for back-to-back wheel gauge as part of our continuing iterative process with Metrorail. This process continues regarding this Metrorail draft procedure. Metrorail has also last week provided a procedure including revised approval requirements and software controls that are meant to address such issues at least 2 recent instances where 7,000 series rail cars were moved on the main line despite not meeting Metrorail's own safety requirements for these out-of-service moves. One of the cars had failed a back-to-back inspection, and the other had not been inspected on the frequency Metrorail had set as a safety requirement. This new procedure lays out requirements and approval steps for use of these cars for moves between yards, de-icing, or other purposes separate from passenger use. Passenger service remains barred by our order until Metrorail develops and implements a return to service plan as specified in our orders. The 2 identified instances were on February 26th, when Metrorail moved railcar 7735 on the mainline tracks, even though it had failed a back-to-back measurement the day before, And on March 16th, when railcar 7264 was moved on the main line, even though it had not been inspected for back-to-back measurements in the past 7 days. Metrorail has determined such an inspection is required for non-passenger movement to be done safely. In each of these events, Metrorail did not follow the safety controls it had laid out. Regarding Metrorail's future return to service plan, Metrorail reiterated its general plans last month to move towards a digital dial gauge measurement of back-to-back wheel gauge and to work towards installation of new wayside inspection systems that may provide an additional layer of protection. Metrorail has not submitted any such plan for WMSC's acceptance at this time. We continue to work through the iterative process I described earlier on a variety of items that Metrorail may make part of its future return to service plan. Metrorail has explained that the purpose of these wayside and shop inspections under a new procedure in a return to service plan would be to ensure that each car is carefully and regularly monitored to detect signs of wheel movement, so that Metrorail can identify and flag any cars that experience wheel movement on the axle and remove those cars from service before that wheel movement reaches to the point where it is likely to cause a derailment. The WMSC appreciate Metrorail's acknowledgement that open communication at all levels of both organizations has been productive related to the 7000 series railcars, and the acknowledgement of the importance of WMATA sharing drafts, information, and ideas openly and constructively with the WMSC as they become available to ensure effective cooperation and collaboration. We look forward to continuing our daily interactions on the 7000 series railcars so that the WMSC can continue to carry out our safety oversight responsibilities in the most timely and appropriate timeframe to assure safety. This includes our reviews and acceptance of relevant Metrorail plans on the timelines that the WMSC and WMATA staffs regularly discuss. The WMSC has consistently provided productive and rapid feedback in open discussions and will continue to do so. The timing of our work is dependent on Metrorail's information sharing and Metrorail's progress on completing its work. When a future Metrorail return to service plan is in place, we will closely monitor implementation of this plan as we did for the prior plan in December. Thank you, and that completes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Amarasinghe. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Ms. Amarasinghe?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lowry.
You mentioned that they're going to use a mechanized measurement system, basically to ensure that the wheel back-to-back measurements are within tolerances. Do we know anything about this system, and really how confident are we that it will give us accurate measurements moving forward?
So we are aware of the specifics that have been used at other rail applications. However, there are specific needs and unique characteristics that the system will need to cater to within the Metrorail system. Our SMEs, our subject matter experts, are involved in various activities and work sessions geared towards ensuring that the technical capabilities and the features of the system are fully understood, are valid, and are able to repeatedly provide accurate measurements. That's one effort that is underway. There's a safety certification effort that is underway to authenticate and validate that the installation and the testing provides reassurance that the system will work without creating unseen or unforeseen hazards in terms of working alongside other systems, other infrastructure and systems that are installed on the Metrorail system. And a third effort is underway to ensure that the mechanism that produces the data is properly understood, fully received, and there are roles and responsibilities assigned throughout the Metrorail organization on how they will address abnormal conditions that are noted by the system. So all this work is ongoing, and the validation of the question that you're raising, whether this is an accurate, repeatable system that can be relied upon, is also part of that entire effort that is underway at Metrorail. And our SMEs are fully engrossed and involved in that from a safety oversight capacity.
And I would just add that includes making site visits with Metrorail staff in the site selection process for the system. But there's no reason to repeat all of the other good things that Ms. Samarasinha just said.
So in moving forward, Metrorail, will they have to periodically calibrate and maintain this equipment? I assume that we're going to make sure that they do that.
Commissioner Lobby, that procedure or procedures are still being worked upon. However, yes, it is our understanding preliminarily that there is an ongoing practice of maintaining and inspecting and maintaining the system. However, those details are still being worked out as to the roles and responsibilities of who will be doing so. And subject matter experts have been very vocal in making sure, regardless of who has the responsibility to inspect and maintain the system, the importance of ensuring that all maintenance teams within track and structures, in plant, in automatic train control maintenance, and all the other varieties of personnel who might find themselves on the right of way are fully cognizant of the existence of these systems and the needs and the unique characteristics of these systems, so that they are not inadvertently disturbed or made inoperable. So all that work is ongoing to prepare a holistic approach to inspect and maintain the system in good working order.
Thank you, Ms. Samarasinha, and thank you, Commissioner Lobby, for the question. Do any other commissioners have any questions for Ms. Samarasinha on this presentation? Okay, hearing none, we will now move on to our next item, which is audits. For that, we'll get an update from Audit and CAPS Program Manager, Mr. Davis Ratic. Mr. Ratic.
Thank you, Chair Hart. We recently issued our rail operations audit. As with each of our audits, the work on this audit included extensive reviews of Metrorail documents, on-site work such as interviews with numerous people, and site visits to various parts of the Metrorail system. Our audits assess Metrorail against the relevant criteria, such as the requirements of Metrorail's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, requirements specified in other Metrorail documents such as SOPs and orders, and regulatory requirements. The audit identified some positive practices, such as the restoration of follow-up classes for new train operators, which would occur 30, 60, and 90 days after their certification. Rail transportation superintendents appear to collaborate effectively, and the rail training department is tracking documents such as temporary and permanent orders and safety bulletins to include them in training classes. However, the audit demonstrates a number of areas where Metrorail is not meeting its own requirements, does not have adequate requirements, or does not have adequate training, coordination, and supervision. As a result, the WMSC issued 14 findings requiring Metrorail to develop corrective action plans and 3 recommendations that Metrorail must address. Audit interviews, site visits, and document reviews demonstrate that elements of Metrorail have a culture that accepts non-compliance with written operational rules, instructions, and manuals. In addition, Metrorail does not effectively identify, track, communicate, and address operational hazards as required by its PTASP. Metrorail also has inadequate internal communication, coordination, and processes to effectively manage change as required by its PTASP, the WMSC, and the FTA. This audit identified a number of specific safety gaps related to Metrorail training and certification requirements that create safety risks due to inadequate training, knowledge, certification, or oversight requirements. A failure to meet those requirements or a lack of documented procedures and processes for personnel to be trained on. These safety gaps include that Metrorail creates safety risks by not requiring and conducting territory familiarization and physical characteristics training, and not assessing knowledge of physical characteristics prior to assigning operations personnel work on a line, in a terminal, or in a yard. Metro is not meeting its operational refresher training and recertification requirements. Metro is not effectively training and certifying personnel authorized to operate trains on all active railcar fleets. Metro has not documented procedures for terminal supervisors and has not established the effective formal training for terminal supervisors needed to safely perform their duties. Metrorail does not have documented criteria to determine student proficiency in practical demonstrations of safety critical operational tasks. Metro does not conduct effective oversight of training instructors. Metrorail does not ensure personnel serving as on-the-job training instructors are effective and have specific training and direction on what to teach, and how to assess their assigned students. With frequent modifications due to temporary and permanent orders and outdated versions of Metrorail's rulebook being distributed to personnel when hard copies are available, the latest Metrorail rules are not easily accessible to train operators. This creates document control issues and makes a rule requiring personnel to carry the latest version of the rulebook unrealistic. Related to Metrorail's internal quality assurance practices, some Department of Rail Transportation, or ARTRA for short, QA/QC audits contain conclusions that do not match actual conditions. ARTRA's QA/QC procedures do not include complete work instructions for all audits or specific instructions for removing personnel from service. Metrorail also closes internal corrective actions and identified issues, including those related to ARTRA QA/QC audits, without fully identifying or completing required improvements or changes. This limits the potential benefits of Metrorail's QA/QC program. Other findings in this audit included that Metrorail does not provide safety oversight of all safety equipment that is or may be past its calibration date that may be in use by operations personnel. Specifically, while conducting field observations, we observed electrical safety gloves past their calibration date. Supervisors stated that they did not know the gloves had calibration dates. Recommendations in this audit relate to effective processes to consider and act upon safety input from employees, dedicating training instructors to operations divisions, and addressing a gap relating to certification for interlocking operators to hand crank switches. As always, the WMSC communicated safety concerns to WMATA as they were identified during this audit process so that Metrorail could begin interim steps to address these safety deficiencies. Metro has until May 9th to provide the required corrective action plan proposals. The audit report provides more specifics about our work on this audit, our findings, the extensive list of documents we reviewed, and the background for our work. This includes areas such as Metrorail's ongoing challenges complying with radio communication protocols that did not lead to a new finding in this audit because there's an open corrective action plan that Metrorail is in the process of implementing. The full report is available at wmsc.gov. We are preparing to transmit the draft report of our station maintenance, elevator, and escalator audit to Metrorail for technical review. As always, we will carefully consider technical corrections from Metrorail, if there are any, before issuing a final report. Following the issuance of the final report, Metrorail will have 30 days to develop and submit corrective action plan proposals to address any findings. The final audit of this 3-year cycle relates to Metrorail's communication systems practices, programs related to voice or data transmission systems and related equipment. For example, radio and public address systems. We completed on-site work for this audit last month and are completing follow-up document review and internal coordination. We have an exit conference scheduled with Metrorail in 2 weeks. To provide the required depth of evaluation for a system as complex as Metrorail, we conduct our audits on an ongoing basis over each 3-year period by auditing distinct elements and functional areas of Metrorail. These audits cover all aspects of Metrorail's public transportation agency safety plan and are designed to proactively identify safety issues. Each finding in our audits identifies an area where Metrorail is not complying with its requirements or external requirements, lacks a necessary requirement or procedure, has requirements or procedures that are insufficient for safety, or where there is an unsafe condition. For each of our findings, Metrorail is required to develop and implement a corrective action plan. Our teams review Metrorail corrective action plan proposals and provide feedback if revisions are required. After a CAP is implemented, the WMSC monitors Metrorail as part of our regular inspections and oversight to ensure that the safety changes remain in place and are continually assessed for effectiveness. Our next audit cycle begins with an audit of Metrorail's programs related to track maintenance and related infrastructure. We transmitted the formal notification letter to Metrorail for this audit last week. On-site activities are planned to begin in June. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Roddick. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Mr. Roddick regarding this report?
Yes, Chair Hart, I do have a question. Obviously, this audit of the rail operations resulted in a significant number of findings. Notwithstanding the number of findings in this audit, my question to Mr. Roddick is, during the course of this audit, what was your feel as to the level of cooperation that you received from the rail operations personnel?
Thank you, Commissioner Hull. For the rail operations audit, just like most of our audits with Metrorail, we usually have people that work with us without any difficulties. People show up for interviews as they're scheduled. We are given access to everything we need to see when we're there on site. So we didn't encounter any unique challenges or any challenges for that matter with the rail operations audit.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hull, for the question. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Roddick?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Bob, please.
Based on the audit, did the audit find that as a result of any safety findings that there was any litigation or injuries? That appropriate question to ask?
Commissioner Bob, is your question, did we explore any litigation that might be pending or?
Correct.
We really don't look into litigation or the results of litigation that might arise from any safety events in the system. I'm not sure if this responds to your question, because I admit my audio chopped out for just a moment, but generally speaking, litigation, is just not a subject of our audit work.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Bob. Any other questions for Mr. Roddick from the commissioners? Okay, seeing none, we will now go to the next agenda item, also Mr. Roddick, which is corrective action plans. Mr. Roddick, the floor is yours again.
Thank you, Chair Hart. When Metrorail develops corrective action plans to address the safety deficiencies identified by WMSC findings and recommendations, Metrorail submits these plans to the WMSC for review and approval. Last week, we provided review and feedback on Metrorail's proposed caps related to the Emergency Management and Fire Life Safety Programs audit, which was issued in February. Metrorail is now revising those cap proposals. After Metrorail submits acceptable cap proposals, Metro is responsible for implementing its corrective action plans on the schedule documented in the cap. We monitor the work that is progressing on each cap as WMATA implements the corrections to close the safety gaps that we identified. Corrective action plans that the WMSC recently closed based on documentation that Metrorail has implemented the cap include C0054 to address the 2020 ROCC audits finding that a repeated failure to address safety issues contributed to a culture in the ROC where frontline workers no longer saw any value in reporting any and recording problems. This cap closure is further evidence that our detailed audit work and findings and our follow-up overseeing Metrorail's corrective actions have a positive impact on safety for Metrorail riders, workers, and first responders. This cap addresses a cultural finding in the ROC similar to what our rail operations audit issued last week found regarding rail transportation. Metrorail's completion of this cap in the ROCC and other elements of its agency safety plan implementation that the WMSC oversees show that Metrorail can address these safety cultures when the required concerted focus and effort is applied through a collaborative approach among frontline workers, managers, and senior leaders. For this cap, C54, Specifically, as required by the WMSC, Metrorail has taken action to ensure that deficiencies are promptly and properly reported, tracked, and repaired. These actions include the initiation of Metrorail's safety management system approach in the Rail Operations Control Center. The SMS approach committed to in Metrorail's agency safety plan requires active hazard identification and assessment and safety risk management to prioritize and mitigate risks. This includes improved safety hotlines and reporting and improving tracking and communication of mitigations. This CAP also included addressing defective microphones and phone equipment in the ROCC. The WMSC continues to oversee this area and communicates to Metrorail when there are any deficiencies that must be addressed, such as recent WMSC identification of and direction to address gaps in phones and microphones that needed to be addressed in Metrorail's backup Rail Operations Control Center facility. Metrorail is in the process of expanding this SMS implementation to other parts of the organization as required by its public transportation agency safety plan. We also recently closed CAP C85, which addressed the finding from the roadway maintenance machine audit that Metrorail was not following safety certification or safety approval process requirements for modifications to existing RMMs. Metrorail incorporated safety department notifications for review into vehicle engineering SOPs and provided documentation that the process was being followed for 9 months. This is one element of broader coordination and safety certification issues that are also being addressed through other corrective action plans. We are separately monitoring Metrorail's implementation of corrective action plans to begin compliance with its safety certification program. Our work on this includes frequent discussions with the safety department and others. Following implementation and closure of any CAP, the WMSC monitors Metrorail's actions through our audit, inspection, and other oversight activities to confirm that Metrorail is continuing the safety improvements it has implemented through the corrective action plan. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Roddick. I have one question that actually may be more appropriate for Dr. Meyer, but I'll let both of you chime in, and that is, we're relatively new yet, so I don't know that we've had occasion to look at whether a CAP that was satisfied 3 or 4 years ago is still being followed, or are they drifting away from it? Do we have any process for overseeing that and making sure that drifting doesn't occur that causes non-compliance with previous CAPs?
That is most definitely part of our process. We are all seasoned Metrorail observers, and some of us, our experience at doing that long predates the certification of the WMSC. So yes, and in fact, when we close a CAP, we communicate to Metro that we will continue to look and pay attention through our inspection, and as we enter our second triennial audit phase. We are beginning to plan and structure those audits to being occurring either to allow time for CAPs to be fully implemented and closed so that we can deliberately go back in and check to ensure that the mitigations are still in place. And we organize a great deal of our effort around ensuring that our CAPs lead to sustained change. But I jumped in quickly. Mr. Roddick or Ms. Samarasinha may have more thoughtful things to say.
Chair Hart, I would just add that it's definitely not too early, even though we're young, to ask that question. The CAPs have been closing, and so that beginning to seeing if those CAPs are still being carried out thereafter the CAP is closed, we do that primarily. Right, we'll be adding for the track audit notification letter that I mentioned earlier. That those initial requests that were part of that notification include document requests related to prior track CAPs from the first track audit in the first triennial cycle. So it's definitely baked into our audit process for sure, but other oversight activities too.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roddick. Do any other commissioners have any questions for Mr. Roddick regarding that report?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lowry.
Yes, Mr. Roddick, you mentioned that Metrorail, this is in reference to CAP 0085. You mentioned that Metrorail provided documentation that the process was being followed for 9 months. And that was in the response to CAP 0085. Is this typical? Does Metrorail usually provide documentation that newer revised processes are actually being followed?
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby. Generally, for CAPs that require some sort of implementation phase, we do include in the corrective action plan a period of time, and it varies depending on what the CAP is. Could be 3 months, could be 6 months, could be far longer. In this case, it was 9 months. So it's typical in the sense that for things that require some implementation piece.
Okay, thank you.
And as Mr. Roddick just said, that's actually approved as a step in the process. It's proposed as part of the CAP proposal and approved as a step in the CAP implementation process. So I wanted to make sure you understood that when Mr. Roddick said we reviewed 9 months of data, it wasn't that Metro happened to supply 9 months of data. It's that was a requirement initially on in the CAP process in order to, as one of the steps of implementing.
So it is standard procedure in the CAP process to obtain that information.
Yes, with including some variability, as Mr. Roddick said, depending on what the CAP is exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby. Any other commissioners have questions for Mr. Roddick? All right, hearing none, we will now move on to our next agenda item, which is our regular status report on our oversight of the Silver Line Phase 2 safety certification process. Mr. Sahu, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Hart. Metrorail and MWA are progressing toward Metrorail declaring an operational readiness state. Metrorail will then take provisional care, custody, and control of the line. Metrorail has not set a specific timeline for that at this point. The WMSC plays no role in determining the operational readiness state. We are tracking approximately 15 open items at this point in our pre-revenue service review Part 1, out of more than 100 items that we have tracked over the course of this process. All of the items have agreed upon paths forward to be completed. Metrorail and the Airports Authority may complete some of these items after Metrorail declares the operational readiness state. WMSC will continue to close these items when the work is completed. As the WMSC has explained since 2019, the WMSC's role in the Silver Line Phase 2 project involves ongoing oversight and frequent communication about any identified safety issues so that Metrorail or MWA can appropriately address them. As we continue our pre-revenue service review work, the WMSC conducts site visits, reviews testing, and holds regular, frequent meetings with Metrorail and the Airports Authority, and we can communicate any concerns as they are identified. Due to this open and iterative communication, Metrorail and MWA are working on or have completed mitigations to address each issue that is currently known. The WMSC's actions are dependent on WMATA following its written safety certification processes. We are now moving into the final stages of our work as specified by the program standard and our communications with Metrorail since 2019. We transmitted the specific documentation of this progression of our work to Metrorail last month. The final stages of our work include ensuring that Metrorail has met its staffing, training, and testing requirements to safely operate the extension, and that Metrorail has taken the other steps required by its safety certification program plan and the cooperative agreement between MWA and WMATA. To ensure this work is efficient and effective, we have requested Metrorail to provide updated documents such as procedures, roadway worker protection guides, training materials, and other information as the updates are completed. This includes continuing our open communication related to scheduled activities and any changes to schedules for activities such as emergency exercises, personnel training activities, and walkdowns, inspections, or other work Metrorail is conducting. Metrorail and MWA have routinely discussed plans to complete some of the required safety steps closer to the start of revenue operations. Obviously, the WMSC can only act on items that the project team has completed. Only after Metrorail completes all the steps that its process requires, such as safety mitigations, repairs, staffing, and training, can the WMSC concur that WMATA has followed the safety certification process specified by Metrorail's policies and procedures. The WMSC and WMATA expect to share draft documents related to the PRSR, which is a pre-revenue service review, and the SSCVR, which is a safety and security certification verification report, on an ongoing basis as part of our already ongoing open communication regarding any identified issues to continue to keep this process moving smoothly. The WMSC has consistently provided productive and rapid feedback in open discussions and will continue to do so. As part of the documentation required for the WMSC to concur that Metrorail has properly conducted its safety certification process, including any necessary safety mitigations or corrective actions, Metrorail will provide the WMSC with WMATA's Safety and Security Certification Verification Report approved by the Safety Certification Review Committee, the SCRC, evidence of that approval, and evidence that the Silver Line Phase 2 project has achieved certification by the Metro Chief Safety Officer. This certification is part of Metrorail's safety certification process and a requirement of the cooperative agreement between WMATA and the Airports Authority. Our concurrence is required before the line may open for passenger service. We continue to closely monitor the Airports Authority, and Metrorail's progress. And I think that completes the presentation, Chair Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Sahu. Do any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Sahu regarding that report?
I have a question, Commissioner Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lobby.
During the summary of the rail operations audit, WMSC said that Metrorail doesn't effectively identify, track, communicate, and address operational hazards as required by its PTASP. Does this situation also exist for the Silver Line? Is this something that we should be concerned about? Is this problem with effectively identifying hazards, is this likely to have any effect on approval or concurrence on the Silver Line?
So Commissioner Lobby, so when Metrorail does take, provisional care of the project, that's when they have a draft operational hazard analysis, if you want to call it a checklist, that should cover, the gamut of any operational risks, the mitigations, and the ability to mitigate them, to the lowest practical level. So we'll be monitoring, using that list. We'll be monitoring Metrorail to ensure that that risk is not there.
Okay, so we don't really expect the shortcoming in their rail operations that found in the rail operations audit to really affect concurrence on the opening of the Silver Line?
No, we do not.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Lobby. And do any other commissioners have any questions for Mr. Sahu regarding this report? Okay, hearing none, we will now move on to the safety investigations part of our agenda. We have 5 safety event investigation reports that are being presented today, and we will hear presentations on all of the reports, then consider a single motion on all the reports that we are prepared to adopt. If any commissioner wishes to remove a report from the group, that we will consider for adoption in a single vote, so that removed procedure can get a separate vote, please indicate that at the end of the presentation on that report. So to give these reports, investigation analyst Natalie Kiro is presenting presenting all 5 reports. Ms. Kiro, the floor is yours. Ms. Kiro, are you on mute?
Natalie, if you hit the microphone, the button by your microphone, the mute button up where there's a mute, there's an up arrow, pick the microphone you want to use.
Normally, this is where I would ask assistance from my IT advisor, AKA my 19-year-old daughter, but I don't have that privilege to do that today, so I'm not sure how we should continue. What do you suggest, Dr. Meyer?
Let's give them just a moment to see if we can get audio from Ms. Quiroz. We were working on that earlier, and I'm hopeful that if she can take advantage of this stalling for a bit, she'll be able to get the correct microphone selected. And if not, we'll ask somebody to pinch hit for her. Unfortunately, that normally would be Mr. Quigley, but he is in training today.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
By 5.
Okay, we were trying to improve the quality with the headphones, but I guess it got worse, so I apologize. All right.
Not to worry.
The first 2 investigations on the agenda today relate to Metrorail's ineffective oversight of contractor work and of contractor safety during work in the Metrorail system. Investigation Whiskey 0156 relates to a serious injury at Navy Yard Station on December 4th, 2021. In this event, a sled being used to move materials during escalator work fell out of control, striking and injuring 2 workers, one of them seriously. Investigation Whiskey 0157 relates to a serious injury at Shady Grove Station on December 1st, 2021. In this event, a painter contractor fell from a ladder and broke their pelvis and wrist. The contractor was wearing a hard hat at the time of their fall. The worker, acting as a subcontractor to a subcontractor for work on the platform canopy at Shady Grove Station, had worked with 3 other contractors to place a cloth on the platform to prepare for painting and to then place a podium ladder. The other workers walked away. The contractor carried tools while climbing the ladder, then began painting. When coming down the ladder, the contractor slipped and fell onto their back on the platform. The contractor's hard hat protected their head as they first hit the ground, then the hard hat came off. Other workers on the platform came to help the injured painter. The painter took themselves to the hospital where doctors diagnosed the painter with a fractured pelvis and fractured wrist. The podium ladder, a standard A-frame ladder with the platform at the top, was not the appropriate work platform for this task. The available rolling scaffold provided a larger, more stable platform. A contractor safety attendant replaced the ladder with a rolling scaffold for other workers. The injury at Navy Yard Station occurred at approximately 5:51 a.m. on December 4th, 2021, as an escalator contractor group was concluding work at Navy Yard Station. The crew of 4 had completed several welding tasks as part of rehab work on escalator W02. A work sled that they had been using to hoist and lower welding equipment dropped out of control down the escalator truss, striking 2 contractors. The sling connection had disconnected from the winch. 1 contractor was seriously injured. The other contractor had minor arm injuries. Metrorail had allowed this work to be conducted despite the work sled and hoist connection having been built by contractors without adequate design safeguards, and despite no work procedure to provide for safety during use of such a device, such as ensuring that workers were out of the way when the sled was in use. The WMSC oversees Metrorail's work and safety obligations, whether that work is conducted by Metrorail employees, contractors, or subcontractors. Metrorail safety rules apply to all of these Metrorail personnel. The WMSC considers the safety of all of these individuals when conducting our oversight work, such as audits and inspections. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Quiroz. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Quiroz?
I have a couple of questions, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lowry.
First of all, on the accident that involved the painter, I was reading the report and it says that tools are not allowed to be carried when using a ladder. Why is the ladder there if you can't use tools on it? I mean, am I missing something here? You're smiling,
Yeah.
Am I missing something?
In this case, they were not supposed to be using the ladder.
But what's the ladder there for? If you can't carry tools on it, I mean, shouldn't it just be out of the station and only use scaffold? I don't understand that concept.
I mean, I guess the ladder could be used, just not carrying tools. So if they needed to inspect something, or it's not that it couldn't be used at all, but just in this context, shouldn't have been used.
So very, very little marginal use of the ladder. I guess if you're a painter with a paintbrush, you're not allowed to carry the brush with you. So I didn't understand that part. But anyhow, let's talk about the escalator. A lot of the discussion on the escalator talks about this homemade sled. Do the escalator mechanics usually use sleds to move stuff up and down?
So when this incident happened, they did inspect all of other escalator work being conducted, and there were no other sleds being used at the time. If there was anything like that, it is supposed to be approved before use. That this particular one was just engineered by that group of contractors, and it wasn't approved by anybody for use.
Well, I guess I'm used to seeing disassembled escalators on Metro, and where they actually take the steps and make a big pile of steps at one end or the other. Is there not a sled that's used to transport those up and down the escalator, or are they taken over to the elevators, or how do they move them around?
I'm sorry, repeat the last part.
How do they move like escalator steps around? Because you see when they rehab those escalators in a metro station that there might be a group of 10 or 15 steps that are piled at one end or the other. How are they supposed to move those around? Don't they use a sled for that?
I don't believe so. In this case, the sled, I don't believe was used for moving anything large. It seemed to be used just for moving tools up and down.
Okay, and just a final question. In reading the report, I wasn't sure whether there is a requirement that when you're moving the sled, that individuals that are working on the escalator, they have to evacuate that area when you're using the sled. Is that a requirement or a suggestion from WMSC or what?
So what they found was even though they had kind of engineered this sled, there really wasn't a procedure in place that if they are to use a sled that's approved in the future, they have to have the procedure that says nobody can be working while it's moving. All work has to stop. Everyone has to be out of the way while it's actually in motion.
So this is a new initiative, not an existing one.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Just turning back for a second, Commissioner Lobby, to the issue of ladders and tools. I don't have a lot of the backstory in this situation, but a lot of ladder safety rules are written to have those who have to climb ladders, avoiding carrying the tools while they're doing so that their hands are free to hold on to the ladder, and also so that the tools don't drop and fall and injure people below. So usually what those rules are looking for is like a tool belt or slings or belt loops or restraining devices, sometimes like a bungee to hang on to the tools so that hands are available to climb the ladders, and so that if a tool is let go of, it doesn't wind up bonking somebody below.
Okay, that makes it a little bit clearer that tool belts would be allowed, or potentially somebody at the top of a ladder could, use a rope or something to pull up another tool or spring bed or something like that. That
seems logical. I'm not as well versed in this particular situation, but just trying to provide a little background on the.
I'll capitalize on that and give you a little bit more on that.
Okay.
Dr. Meyer is absolutely right about having a tool belt or some other device that they can be carried. But with ladder training, people are taught that you always maintain 3 points of contact when you are carrying something up a ladder. So that was one issue. The other issue was the working surface of the podium ladder wasn't enough of a surface for the gentleman to be on when he was conducting his duties. So that's the,
So as far as we're concerned, it was appropriate to have a ladder in the station at all, correct?
they can have a ladder in this station. It's just the use of the ladder. And I don't, for him to not have.
There are valid uses of the ladder in the station, you know. If you have a tool belt on, you can go up top and then take the tools out and do it, as long as you keep that 3-point connection with the ladder as you're going up or down. That's okay.
Right.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, it's always the right tool for the right job. So if the ladder and he's using a vertical surface and that's all, but as a painter where they're moving from left to right or horizontal, then the working surface would need to be different and they would use a scaffolding as opposed to a straight ladder.
Well, let me chime in on those questions and ask, was the ladder for the purpose of getting onto the scaffold, but not for the purpose of doing work from the ladder? Is that the idea? You're supposed to do the work from the scaffold where you have a much bigger platform to put your stuff versus trying to do the work from the ladder? Do I have that right, or am I not understanding?
Yeah, that seems to be right.
So I have some questions about the oversight in general. That do we have any? This appears to be two situations involving lack of adequate oversight by Metrorail over its contractors, and I'm just wondering, are we going to propose any action to improve that level of oversight to try to prevent these things from happening again?
Yes, so each department, in this case for the escalator, especially, they have almost completed all of those recommended corrective actions. At this point, there's, I think we have another date in a couple more weeks, but they have made it mandatory for contractors to have a safety superintendent to inspect all the equipment before the work can begin. They are having the elevator escalator department complete their actual inspectors, which they already have inspectors, but they're having them complete a new training to help them identify what they're looking for, and if they find a problem, how can they effectively stop work, or who do they notify when they see something unsafe. So there are a lot of, as a result of this incident, a lot more recommended corrective action plans for that oversight for contractors.
Okay, so that's already underway. I didn't hear that in your report. That's why I didn't know that. Okay, thank you. Do any other commissioners have any questions for Ms. Quiroz on those two reports? Okay, Ms. Quiroz, now the floor is yours again to present the remaining reports.
Thank you, Chair Hart. There are 3 additional investigation reports ready for your consideration today. The first, Whiskey 0158, relates to a fire and fatality near Franconia Springfield Station in the overnight hours of December 17th into December 18th, 2021. In this event, a person walked through the end gate at the end of the station platform unnoticed just before 9 p.m. on Friday, December 17th. The individual appears to have then contacted the third rail in the tail track area that is used to store trains beyond the station. Several hours later, just after 2 a.m., flames are visible in the tail track area on CCTV recordings. Signal system data shows that a track circuit in this area also went down at this time. The investigation determined these flames were due to flammable materials that the person was carrying. The fire and the individual's body were discovered several hours later after Fairfax County Fire and Rescue was called around 4:30 a.m. to respond to a brush fire adjacent to Metrorail property. Fairfax County first responders later determined the fire extended to Metrorail's tail tracks. The other 2 investigations, Whiskey 0159 and Whiskey 0160, relate to evacuations for life safety reasons of Huntington and Crystal City stations on December 6th and December 25th, 2021. These events require investigations under federal regulation and the WMSC program standard. These investigations include assessment of coordination and emergency preparedness, including those items covered in our emergency management and fire and life safety audit issued in February. Neither of these investigations identified any significant deficiencies. On December 6th, a rail transportation supervisor reported that a person on the platform at Huntington Station appeared to be lighting a bottle on fire or carrying what might be a bomb. The train and Huntington Station were evacuated for life safety reasons. Metro Transit Police did not find any explosives and did not identify any fire. On December 25th, Metrorail received a report of a bomb threat at Crystal City Station. The station was evacuated and Metrorail had trains bypass the station, meaning run through the station without stopping. Metro Transit Police swept the station and later determined that it was safe to reopen for service. This investigation identified opportunities for Metrorail to have clearer internal communication. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Quiroz. Did these investigations, these three investigations, find issues that needed to be addressed? Because I don't really see any reference to that.
So there weren't any major deficiencies. I think one of the main ones for the bomb threat was when the control center receives a report of something from MTPD, there is a little bit of a back and forth with them. When they first got the report, it's up to MTPD to decide if they're bypassing the station where we're allowing trains to actually travel there but not stop, or if we have to actually completely turn trains around where they can't enter that area at all. And it's MTPD's decision, but kind of getting that information from them to the controllers is something that they need to improve.
Okay, thank you. And did we have any idea why the person went beyond the end gate, or is there any way to determine that at this point?
So the theory is because the customer seemed to have the spray paint in their pocket, which probably ignited the flames, that the person was going back there possibly to write graffiti.
Did that person survive?
No.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Quiroz? So now I'd like to look into the approval process, and I would be willing to accept approval of all 5 of the reports at once, but if any commissioners have any concerns about any of that, this would be the time to bring that up. Are the commissioners good to go with doing it as 5? Okay, hearing no concern, is there a motion to adopt the investigation reports that have just been presented, which is Whiskey 0156, 157, 158, 159, and 160?
I'll move.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Is there a second to Commissioner Hall's motion?
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Bob, thank you for the second. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay.
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 All those opposed?
Chair Hart,
Okay.
the vote is 6-0 and the motion carries.
Okay, thank you. One moment here, I'm encountering a technical difficulty. I will be right back. Where's my IT advisor when I need her? Okay, so all 5 of those reports have been accepted as presented. Thank you for that. That completes our business for today because we have no resolutions on our agenda, but I do understand that Ms. Samarasinha would like to make a comment before we close.
Yeah, Hart, just going back to a previous agenda item, and this was on the audits. I want to make sure that the extensive work that our staff does is fully represented here. Your question was, do we evaluate whether or not the corrective action plans that have been instituted by predecessor oversight entities are holding or are being sustained at Metro? And so as part of the audit work that we do, as we audit each of the functional areas that we've done for the last 3 years, which we are wrapping up here in our first triennial cycle that is ending, we do, as a standard practice, review all of the corrective action plans that have been noticed by the previous safety oversight entities like the FDA Safety Oversight, the Tri-State Oversight Committee, and even the National Transportation Safety Board in its investigations and the recommendations it issues. And so we evaluate whether or not any and all of those recommendations or corrective action plans which Metro has taken upon itself to implement are holding. And you will see in each of the audit reports that we have issued so far since 2019 that we do dedicate some amount of each audit report to describe these in detail. So I just want to make sure that the commissioners are aware of it, and the staff who do extensive work on it do get the representation here on the work that they're doing.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Samar Singh. That's very helpful. Any commissioners have any questions regarding that? Okay, hearing none. Before we adjourn, as a reminder, you can always report any concerns, any safety concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or by email. We presently expect to hold our next public meeting on May 24th, 2022, and we look forward to seeing everyone then. Thank you for those of you who attended the meeting today remotely, and thanks to the WMSC staff for their presentations today, and thanks to the commissioners for being so engaged in the process so that we can all benefit by continuous improvement of the Metro line system. Is there any further business to be conducted today? Okay, hearing none, this meeting is hereby adjourned.